Hello everyone and welcome to this panel discussion on the adoption of AI in property valuation. My name is Aaliyah Pollock and I work at RICS, and for those of you who are not aware, RICS is the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors. We're a professional body that sets standards and regulate chartered surveyors right across the built and natural environment, including land, real estate, construction and infrastructure. With over 150 years of heritage and more than 300,000 members worldwide, we support our members in creating sustainable and resilient environments, influencing public policy and driving positive societal change. As for my role here at RICS, I work within data and tech, and I sit within the thought leadership team. And in this role, I assess the impacts of data and technology right across the built and natural environment. I'm very happy to be here today, to be joined by Alex, Mike, and Onur. So moving across to you, Alex, would you like to give a brief introduction of yourself and your firm?
Perfect. Amazing. Yeah, so thank you for that. And yeah, just to give a little bit of an introduction to myself, I'm Alex. I'm one of the co-founders of Valos. And before I go into all of that, I wanted to give a little bit of background into the actual sector and set the scene a little bit. So as we all are probably aware, to some extent, the property sector somewhat lags behind other sectors when it comes to innovation and adoption of technology. But interestingly, some research done by JLL indicated that within the property sector itself, looking at all those different subsectors, it's actually the valuation subsector which lags behind all others when it comes to innovation and adoption of technology. And you can see it in the kind of bottom right-hand corner of that table there. And this presented a huge opportunity for the incorporation of technology, and it's really where the whole story for Valos comes about from. So to give you a brief introduction to myself, I actually used to be a valuer, and it was during this time doing valuations that the idea for Valos came about, because I find myself being quite frustrated with the way we were doing valuations. It was very administrative heavy. Gathering lots of different data from different data sources, putting that into templates, copy and pasting that, and then doing the whole formatting as well. And I wasn't spending enough time on actually analyzing data and determining value, which is what you're essentially employed to do. When I looked at what was out there in the market, there really wasn't anything there from a perspective to benefit the valuers. All I really saw were automated valuation models, which looks to essentially do the valuer's role. And I thought that was a little bit backwards from a technology perspective. And what we are really keen on doing is empowering the valuers and not replacing them. And we empower them through the use of that technology and artificial intelligence to enable them to actually get on with their day-to-day role and add value in the process itself. And just a few of the firms using the platform, from global consultancies like Colliers, Knight Frank, Avison Young, CBRE, all the way through to one-man bands. And it's really because actually, irrespective of the size of the company, the process for producing a valuation report is exactly the same. So every valuation report is an amalgamation of data integrated into a template with some valuer input. So it really has application across the entire industry. And just very quickly, some key benefits. You get all the usual ones that you associate with technology. So improved efficiencies and accuracies, ultimately leading to increased profitability. But actually, and an often overlooked element to it, is the human impact of technology. So not only improving client satisfaction through faster report turnaround and having more time to spend developing those relationships, but actually employee satisfaction as well when it comes to empowering the workforce and enabling them to do what they're actually employed to do and not be too overly bogged down with administrative tasks. So that's a little bit of background to myself and Valos.
And Onur, thank you very much for joining us today. Would you like to share a little bit about yourself and your company?
I'm just going to kind of leave one screen on for now. So first of all, I'm Onur Demirci. I'm the founder and CEO of FinWise. FinWise is regulated by the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors, as well as we're a tech partner to the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors. So first of all, I mean, we are, first of all, a little bit background about myself. So I'm Onur. I was one of the youngest associate professors or senior lecturers for the last 5 years before kind of forming FinWise and actually kind of working with FinWise team and forming the team. Before then, I've kind of worked within the financial services sector. So there's an element of both practical and theory and application to both mathematics as well as kind of understanding property and valuations. So why did I wanted to kind of form FinWise? Why did the whole idea of concept FinWise came about? So there's a lot of different technologies out there, and some of them are quite big and really grown. But still, speaking to financial institutions, there's always these barriers. So there's first of all, there's clear need that these digital tools are needed because they do need to rely on it, and every financial institution have a different threshold when it comes to using these technologies. But there was always that limitation because technically speaking, you're not really replacing a red book report. So it was never a red book report. And the problem that you have with that is, again, it's just nothing but an illustration of numbers that came together, and the data could be taken from anywhere. So the reliability of that data is not very much there, and the risk is still very much with the financial institutions or the lenders or underwriters, whoever wants to use it. So FinWise, on the other hand, gives you a full red book report with full professional indemnity insurance, which means that any financial institution, lender, any company or individual that wants to use a red book report, they can rely on it. So the reliability or hedging risk is something that we provide and nobody else can. We're backed by top venture capital funds, and we are, again, predominantly just focusing on this part of the, I guess I'll say, market, which is specifically targeting the human valuation aspect of things. So I mean, AVMs, of course, they're out there, and again, we're not an AVM, and we have no intention to take part within the AVM space, but it's all about the human valuation and to collaborate predominantly with human valuers and to make sure that we can do things a lot more efficiently and accurately and provide that. So that is kind of myself and FinWise. So yeah, I thought I'll do it pretty quickly. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And finally, Mike, would you like to share a bit about yourself?
I'm Mike. I'm the COO of QES, which is a tech for good software development company, and I'm also the co-founder and product owner of SurveySphere, which is our latest product that we've put to market, which is an AI-powered remote video inspection product. So for the past sort of 12 years, we've been working closely in collaboration with Countrywide Surveying Services. We've been building innovative tools for them, anything from desktop valuation solutions right through to post-valuation queries after a valuation's happened. And so we've had a fair amount of time in the industry working with these guys to solve problems. And I think the one thing that really resonated with us as something that takes up a lot of time for a surveyor is the travel time to and from inspections. And so fast forward a couple of years, and last month we launched SurveySphere, and the idea with that is that we cut out travel time to and from inspections so that inspectors can essentially be more efficient with their time and spend more time doing the specialist work that they're meant to be doing and not just stuck in a car all day. So, you know, brief overview from me, but I think that probably covers it. And yeah, thanks very much for having me on the call today.
Thanks, everyone. Let's kickstart this discussion with a very complex question. Now, it may be a very difficult question to answer, but let's go around the table. Alex, starting with you. What does AI mean to you, and how is your firm using it?
Yeah, so this is a really interesting question. Actually, the literature itself isn't necessarily conclusive in the definition of AI. I think the the way that we see it, and actually one of the kind of simplest definitions for AI, is basically the ability for a computer system to perform tasks that would typically require human intelligence. So aspects like learning and making decisions from and identifying patterns from data, recognizing and understanding just general natural language, those are kind of typically associated with artificial intelligence. And actually, all of those different variations are aspects of the AI and AI subsets that we include in the Valos platform. So a lot of natural language processing, natural language generation, the incorporation of large language models to better output and understand data, both in written forms and in visual forms as well. So we use it in a variety of factors, but importantly, in a way to empower the valuers to better enhance the output of their valuation reports.
Thank you. Onur, moving on to you.
So, I mean, I agree with Alex there. So I will just kind of add a little bit onto that layer. And so specifically, so first of all, the term of AI is heavily used in, I guess, in the sector. But when you actually dig a little deeper, you would see that most of them are not actually AI. Because again, it's just a buzzword, right? That everybody uses. So what I would say kind of makes something more AI is more, I guess, the whole element of having complicated machine learning technology. So it falls very much within the ML, so machine learning techniques. So this could, for example, what we also use at Finvise is artificial neural networks. So this is where the system could replicate a human decision process. Obviously, there's many layers to this, and there are a lot of optimizations like mask learning and so on. And as well as there's different algorithms such as convolutional neural network, which we also utilize. So these different technological advancements, kind of bringing them together, the sole purpose here is actually to, people always think that AI is all about being better than human. No, if anything, the more closer you can get to a human means that you did a brilliant job. So it's all about replicating what a human can do, right? And that is exactly, I guess, what we do at Finvise. So AI for us is being able to use technological advancements to replicate a human decision process, and that is the key. So that's my perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike, do you have anything to add?
I think the guys have covered it off pretty well, actually, in terms of what AI is. I think I would just add to say that I think in a practical sense, what we want to be trying to do with AI is once we've been able to mimic the human behavior that we're targeting, use the sort of computing power behind that to be able to scale that up, make it more efficient, speed up the whole process. So I think for me, and certainly reflected in our products as well, is a need there to use AI to make things more efficient and spend time doing other things. Yeah.
Thanks. I think it's very important to just take a step back and look at what Alex, starting with you, what do you think the key factors are when determining the value of an asset, and how can AI enhance this process?
Oh, yeah. Well, look, there's many different factors that feed into how to value an asset. Not only comparable evidence, but macro, microeconomic factors, specific building factors. But ultimately, as the way I was taught valuations is that it's not a science. It is part art and part science. And it's that amalgamation. And I think that the AI aspects feed quite well into that scientific element to property valuations, but the art element is really about the value and knowledge, the value integrity throughout the process that can't be replicated by technology. And I think that's a really important distinction to make. So it's not like, for example, to give a really simplistic answer, it's not like, right, if you've got 100% of the value of the asset is based on like an EPC rating of A, it doesn't just decrease by 2.5% because your EPC is rated as B. There's various different factors, and it's very difficult to get that specific and scientific when it comes to the valuation of a property. It's the amalgamation of a number of different data points plus valuer integrity in the process that really helps drive that valuation process.
Thanks, Alex. I think with the adoption of new technology, it can be very difficult for every firm, and there are many challenges posed. So looking at the challenges of AI, I know that data is a huge issue. Everything from data quality, standardization, and even missing data are having huge impacts on the implementation of technologies such as AI. And Onur, you mentioned previously the issues around data, so I'll pose this question to you. How does bad data impact the effectiveness of AI in property valuation, and what measures do you think can be taken to improve data quality?
Of course. Just going into that, I think it's important to highlight what you've also said and Alex kind of answered. So first of all, valuation is definitely an art, not a science. We kind of agree to that. There is an element of science, I agree, but it's predominantly an art, right? But I think what everybody kind of, or majority of the population get is, well, when humans makes this decision, how did they get that knowledge, right? So it's so they've obviously accumulated that knowledge. So it's an exposure to scenarios, situations, and it is this is how they kind of form that knowledge. They created patterns in their mind. So if we're talking about true AI or deep tech AI, which is exactly what we're doing at ThinWise, that allows you to then manipulate that. So you can make that same decision. You can actually follow the same pattern just like a human would, because you can technically say, well, you know, it's just AI is just a bunch of numbers doing mathematical formulas, and they're just doing some, you know, coding in the background, and they just do it that way. So first of all, that is incorrect. So first of all, we are following the RICS Red Book standards. It's also very important to recognize that in this aspect, you are following exactly what a human would do, and you're following, and the way you do that is because you overload, right, the AI with all this data. So answering your question here is, well, first of all, in terms of, in our case anyway, with a deep tech AI, there is no such thing as actually a bad data. It's about, you accumulate all data because you need every data, but then if the AI that you're referring to have the capability to do cross correlation, then you expect the AI to be able to make decisions correctly, whether you are faced with a bad data or not. So if you are in a position where you have obtained the data from a public source and that is open for everybody, but then you know the data set isn't quality in comparison to a closed source data, let's say one of our clients, let's say they provided that data internally and we do trust that data, then if the AI has the capability to do a cross-reference check and to see which one is the true, you know, one source truth here, then it can rely on that and has more weighting factor to it. So that would be the way to look at data and to analyze good and bad data. So that's kind of would be my perspective. Was there anything else that you added? I do apologize if I missed it.
Can I just jump in there, just to add on to what Onur said? Completely agree with what was said, but I would interject and say, if you look at the multitude of data sets that you have to include for property valuations, like from like planning applications to EPCs to whether or not the property is listed, whether it's in a conservation area, so on and so forth, all these different factors will have some sort of an impact on the value of the asset depending on the use class and the purpose of valuation. And ultimately, these data sets predominantly come from government sources, either held at a government level or at a council level, and the quality of data held within those from our findings are not good, to the extent that different searches or the same searches will bring up different search results and so on. And so there needs to be, what we found is that none of these open public data sets can be relied upon as they are found without any kind of data science, data manipulation, data quality assurance testing. The way that you have to use these data sets is actually interrogate the quality of those data sets, pass them through a data pipeline to ensure that the outputs are correct. And if you just use the data as it comes, then the outputs will be as poor as the quality of data that is within those set data sets.
Thank you, Mike. Do you have anything to add on that note?
Yeah, I think Alex and Onur are probably coming at two different types of AI here, because we're saying, you know, from a computer vision perspective, I think you need to be able to take in good and bad images and be able to determine outputs from that. But I think from you know, my experience with data, particularly I would say, within the surveying industry, is that the formats of the data, even down to things like not getting an address come through with, the very basic information you require to locate it. I think if you start feeding that into models that are, automatically learning, then you're going to get a bad output from that.
You can get the same properties with completely different addresses on two completely different government websites. So it becomes a very tricky situation to marry all of that up.
Onur, you've mentioned accumulating data, and Alex, you mentioned how you need such a wide source of data. Now, to share this data, collaboration is crucial for the successful implementation of AI. I actually visited a conference this week called PropFest, and we discussed at length the requirements, barriers, and drivers of data collaboration in this field. So, Alex, what do you think some of the challenges are you face with data collaboration in your projects, and how did you overcome them?
So what we tend to find typically with some of our clients as well, especially if you want to benefit from data based within clients' existing infrastructure, is that data tends to exist within silos, within teams. And therefore, if you can get an overall view of a property or of an asset, typically the way that companies tend to operate now is they'll have a valuation team, an agency team, and a management team, let's say, and potentially all of those different teams have worked on the same property, but none of those teams have shared that data with the other teams. There's no centralized database or data warehouse to store and house that data and call upon that data as and when a respective team is working on that similar asset to drive and improve the service offered to their clients. So yeah, as we mentioned, the incorporation of good data is imperative to any good output, and the more you can benefit from a wider array of data sets relating to the similar asset, the better that output will be. But that does require collaboration, and at the moment that collaboration within teams, within firms, and within, let's say, governments and councils just doesn't exist, which ultimately makes it far harder for anyone to gather all of those data sets and amalgamate them into one.
Okay, just taking a step back from data, there are many barriers to the adoption of AI within the industry. This year, we actually conducted a data and tech annual survey, and so we also conducted this survey post-COVID, and the same barriers to adoption have came up this year and are predicted to continue into 2024 and onwards. So the biggest barrier that we had to the adoption of data and technology was this behavioral resistance to change. Moving on to you, Mike, how have you addressed this resistance to change within organizations and with clients?
I think with clients, so being a software technology company, there's always resistance to adoption, right, of new things. And I think ultimately we've just got to work really closely with the people that, your role. So I'm speaking from a client perspective here. So working with clients to make sure that, they have a good understanding of the technology, they understand where the benefits are within it, and to know that, we're doing these things to help them essentially. Like we need to be able to put the end user first, and the surveyor first. So I think it's bringing them along with you, so ensuring that it's a bit of a journey with them, and that's going to involve certain touch points throughout the process, good training, good onboarding, all of these sorts of things, but ultimately they we need to make sure that they're not feeling as though it's being pushed upon them, and they have a good understanding.
So Onur, the rapid pace at which technology advances, it's daunting, it's scary for the industry. What advice would you give to others in the industry looking to implement technology such as AI?
I mean, it's definitely, this is something that I'm seeing with the financial institutions that we're collaborating with at the moment. It's to give opportunity for, I guess, the technology or software companies to actually showcase their work. So it would be, in our case, do two reports and put them side by side, human versus FinWise and look at the result yourself and see the amount of depth and detail, and most importantly, the accuracy that you will get with it. So I think it's an opportunity for, you know, change is inevitable. It's happening not just in this sector, but it's happening in every sector. And I think it's important to, you know, work together with technology in order to, I guess, make, I guess, their life easy, shall we say? So it's just being able to have that opportunity, and I think that would be what I would say.
Thanks for that. You mentioned how change is inevitable, but Alex, do you think that companies are prepared for the changes that AI brings? Do you think that the industry is ready? And what can companies do to better prepare?
In short, no, I don't think the companies are ready for the vast majority, and I'd actually probably say all that we've spoken to. The simple matter of fact is, well, number one, most of the companies that we speak to don't have the required infrastructure to maximize the adoption of AI, but ultimately they also don't take advantage of technology that has been there and software that has been there for the past 5-10 years that could drive a huge amount of efficiency gains if that is the main measure of success for these firms. And so to then look at ways to incorporate experimental technology, because it is still experimental, it's still constantly developing. You've got a lot of firms that are not using basic technologies that are having kind of their eyes drawn to this hype around AI, which is currently in its infancy. It's constantly developing, it's constantly changing, and it's still being understood. So it does somewhat pose a question as to, should these firms by and large actually be looking at AI solutions when potentially they don't have the foundations and infrastructures in place to really benefit from that incorporation of technology?
So ultimately, firms need to start small before they move on to the bigger technology.
Yeah, absolutely, and not get too drawn into the whole AI side of things from the outset, because it is still experimental. And again, you don't want to be making mistakes, especially because this panel is about valuations. You definitely don't want to start experimenting on valuations and then watch the PI insurance rise. So yeah, if you do make a mistake. So yeah, absolutely.
Can I just come in here? That's okay. So would we then not think, because technically, you know, you see the change. So it was kind of, you know, let's say in the 1950s, the mass valuation theory was adapted, right? So it's we're talking, you know, way back, and then now then you've gone through a phase of these automated valuation models coming in, and the industry is using that. It's again going back to the same word again, but it's inevitable that the change is there. But then equally, you see the demand, because you can see the amount of, or the usage of with these automated valuation models. And the next step is kind of, again, you know, bringing in FinWise, but you know, you got these red book valuation reports with full professional indemnity insurance. Why? Well, because there is a need. There is a need in the sector that this is actually what's needed. And then I'm aware that this is a stepping stone. There's going to be, you know, something further that's going to continue to advance. But it's the need of the industry is what's driving the technology. So it's also, it goes hand in hand as well. So the need and the demand, what pushes people like us to form these technology companies, and in order to cater to those needs. And so it's not, you know, I guess this goes with all my colleagues in the room here today. You know, we don't just wake up with these dreams and imaginations and feel like we're going to go ahead. It's more like seeing a need and demand, recognizing that need and demand, and being early adapters in order to make that happen. And I think that's the key point to I would say to take away here. So yeah.
So it seems that some firms are very ahead of the trend and others are really behind, or haven't implemented it in the right way. So as we talk about AI and property valuation, it's really important to remember that technology should be here to help us and not replace us. AI can make things faster and more accurate, but we need to make sure that it's actually making our jobs easier and not just replacing our roles and responsibilities. So Mike, I'll pose this question to you. How do you think that we can ensure AI works for people and not the other way around?
I think we've got to start at the problem. and we talk, we've spoken a bit today about new shiny things and our attention being drawn to those shiny things, but ultimately, every business has got their own set of challenges. They've got their own set of opportunities that they're going for, and I think really AI needs to be treated as any sort of business case in a way, because we're basically saying, well, what's the return on our investment into this? And I think if that stacks, then great, we should adopt it. That whatever tool it is that embodies AI, probably because it's going to make us more efficient. But equally, if it doesn't stack and it's just, well, it's everyone's using it, but really it's not going to benefit our business, then you should put it to one side and move on to the next thing. But I think with technology, it's always moving, it's always improving. So I think that needs to be adopted as well. We need to be able to iterate quickly. We need to be able to fail quickly, and learn from those things and move on. But we've got to start from, and I think this is always the case with software. You need to start from the problem. What is the problem? And then what are the tools available to help you to solve that?
Thanks for that, Michael. Alex, I'll move on to you. What foundational steps do you think that companies should take before implementing new AI technologies?
This is probably more of like an IT infrastructure question, which is probably beyond my expertise. But really, ultimately, I would just echo what Mike said, and companies really need to identify where the problems are currently in their operations and identify the necessary tools to solve those issues. Many of those issues really don't need AI to solve them, but certainly AI could be a hugely powerful tool to implement once you've got that infrastructure in place, or if there is a software provider that can easily integrate with your existing systems and help you leverage the capabilities of AI to really drive that progress. So yeah, it really is what Mike said, just focusing on the problems, how you can then incorporate technology within that, and how AI can be then incorporated further to drive those efficiencies, but also how you then marry up your existing workforce to work in conjunction with technology, use that technology to empower your workforce, not replace them. But that also requires some change management aspects to it as well, some educational aspects to it as well.
So looking at that educational aspect and what needs to be put in place for us to adopt these technologies, how do you think governing bodies like the RICS needs to address these changes about AI to ensure that it's beneficial and not harmful? Onur, do you have any comments?
Just before moving on to that, just if I may, because this is very important for us as well at FinWise, we don't exist to replace valuers, right, or any other professional. So that is not our mission, vision, or objective as a company. We are here to empower them. Now, I think AI exists in order to empower people. And how do you empower them? Well, in order to, I guess, in the case of FinWise anyway, or valuation, it's to stop valuers to worry about forming a report together or putting a reliable data sets together, or it is to stop doing these continuous cycle of same repetitive tasks. So it is for them to really be empowered by doing the things that they love doing. So in this case, it's to go out and look at the condition of a structure. Go and look at the condition, look at the property in that perspective, not from gathering data, not from looking at your comparable data sets or doing all these different repetitive tasks that you would have to do for each property. So these are the sort of things that we want to eliminate and predominantly just focus on what people do best, right? And for them to collaborate, for engage, and these are the sort of things AI never going to replace. Your relationship as a valuer with a client, the way how you do certain things in a certain way. I don't necessarily mean collecting data, but visiting, doing, touching things, where your expertise are out, right? And you can look at the structure, you can test certain things, and you can feel it and touch it. So that's never going to be replaced. And And nobody wants to do that anyway. Nobody wants to take that away from that person. So it's very important to highlight that. So would you mind if we could repeat the question again?
Oh, don't worry. Just leading on to that point that you just mentioned about how AI is here to empower people. How can we ensure that the next generation of surveyors and professionals, that they're not de-skilled due to the rise of AI?
Yes, and very good question. So, as a senior, as an ex-senior lecturer, it's very important that these academic institutions recognize that earlier on, and which, for example, I did because I was also a programs director in my institution. So you need to be, first of all, you need your academics to be very well equipped to understand the future of the profession, and B, to ensure that your program coordinators, leaders, academics, then to embed that within their modules. So it's important for each of the modules, and in this case, valuations, to embed those sort of technology and attach to it. So this could be either there's a practical element of it. So in the higher education academy framework, there is also a section where it's not just about theory. There's a theory aspect, but there's the practicality aspect. So it's about getting these academic institutions to recognize, embedded as within their modules, both from theory and practice. And that would be the way to prepare the future surveyors to be equipped. And again, and this equipment is very important because by equipping them, you're also making them highly employable as well, because it's inevitable. I mean, this already exists, right? Big valuation firms already use a range of softwares and systems, and they would expect you to know. And they even were, not that long ago, but when I was an academic, there were certain programs that our students had to know, because when they start the grad scheme, they needed to know how to operate those systems. So again, and I think there needs to be just a step up from the academic institutions and understand that those softwares are kind of a little bit old now, and there needs to be a little bit more newer ones coming in. So
Thank you very much, and I think that's a very interesting topic. Earlier at a conference this week, I picked up on a comment that someone said, and it's all around attracting the talent from the youth today. If the industry remains reluctant, then we only lose this talent to industries that are excelling in data collaboration and the adoption of technology such as the medical field or fintech. But moving on well, it's a question for everyone really. We've spoken about education, but what do you guys think that professional bodies like the RICS can do to address the rise of AI and ensure that it's beneficial and not harmful to the industry?
yeah, I was just going to say, I think especially those programs that are RICS accredited, I think RICS plays a crucial role ensuring that basically what we've just discussed about the whole concept of AI, both theory and practice, is truly embedded within these modules. And I think RICS should definitely ensure that is in there in the programs. At the same time, I think in part of the APC interviews, I think there needs to be a clear section within this interview, the whole AI, the technology, and so on. Especially, I'm talking about from valuation pathway here, or the commercial pathway. It's important for that to be embedded. So by doing that, you're actually pushing these academic institutions to integrate this within their modules. Therefore, students are now empowered and equipped, and especially if the RICS is going to ask this in an interview, in an APC interview, then you're also getting these people to work and use as part of their training. So if it's part of a competency, so they're going to have to use it, and if it's part of the interview, then they're going to have to make sure that they're trained and equipped.
Can I just jump in there? I think we have to be very careful about trying to turn the property industry into an industry that it's not. The property industry and the technology industry are two completely separate industries, but they can and should and do work in collaboration with each other. I don't necessarily think it's the property industry's role or the RICS's role within the property industry to include modules on artificial intelligence and train people to become developers or prompt engineers or whatnot. I think the role of property and the role of the RICS in governing property valuation specifically should remain fairly high level from a training perspective. We're not trying to train the next generation of coders and prompt engineers, but it's the RICS's role, I believe, to govern what does and doesn't constitute red book valuations and the role that technology can play within valuations should be clearly outlined by the RICS to help both the valuation firms and the clients of those valuation firms to really understand what does and doesn't constitute a red book valuation, and potentially going as far as saying, oh, well, to be red book compliant, if you do use technology, there has to be some human oversight throughout the process to ensure that the technology and the valuer input are working in tandem with each other. So I just want to kind of outline that I don't think it's necessarily our role to start creating a whole tech thing within the property industry, but actually just high level, this is how tech should be implemented within valuations.
We get asked this a lot with software, especially within surveying. You know, can we use this product? Can we use this platform from a surveyor's perspective? And I think obviously if people are asking those questions and they're probably unclear about, you know, what they can and can't do, especially with things like Redbook. But I think what it comes down to is being really transparent. I think as a surveyor, you know, carrying out the valuation in terms of what technology has been used in order to arrive at that valuation, and you know, an element of as you say, human intervention. You still need to have someone review that and sign it off. But I totally agree with Alex. I think if you start bringing in specific modules within RICS guidance about technology and AI, you know, where does that stop? I mean, there's so many different elements then that you can bring in. I think it should always be about the valuation itself, and there's various tools available in order to help surveyors do a good job of that and do a quick job of that. But ultimately, it comes down to the surveyor themselves that's carrying it out.
Sorry, so when I maybe clarify, so when you bring in technology into the property students, I don't necessarily mean to get them to do coding. What I meant was being able to confidently use technological tools as part of their decision process. So this is a completely different thing. And this is one of the issues that we have in the industry. People are not comfortable and enough to be able to use, right? So
yeah,
so the fact that training someone how to use an iPhone doesn't make them a coder or developer, right?
Correct.
So it's the same thing.
But that's not the RICS's role or property consultancies or institutions. That's a role of the software provider to make sure that the onboarding, the training, and so on is provided, and people know
Alex,
how and when to use their tools.
But at the same time, Alex, I think it's also important to recognize that the way you approach the technology plays a vital role. If you go for an entire university program being told that technology is bad for you, and right, and it's like, oh, don't stay away from it, then obviously that's the perception you are going to have. It's not about you onboarding someone. If somebody looks at a technological tool in a very different light, it's a completely different thing. So what I'm saying here is training students where they use technology as part of a decision process. And sure, having that as a foundation means you're right. Then any adoption of technology will be, of course, onboarded hopefully in the correct way.
Agreed.
So
agreed. I don't think anyone's saying technology is bad, but yeah, completely agree.
But this is where regulators kind of come in, right? So there's a framework, and that framework needs to be, I think, created. And I think that is what's lacking at the moment, I would say. Someone from academia, or historically in academia for 5 years, I would say.
What do you think that framework would look like?
I think that framework would be very, very simple. It would, this is obviously, it's like a progress. So it will initially embed using various softwares as part of the projects. So I gave projects to my students and I made sure they use technology. So that was already there for me. So they would use a range of softwares without naming any of them. You know, they would use that as part of their decision process. So then you're actually getting students to be more comfortable clicking around and using software. So you're not only now making them highly employable, but you're also giving them these additional soft skills which they never had before. But then in the background of all this, you're actually getting them to engage and use technology. So they are empowering themselves. So and being more comfortable doing it. So then that would be the starting point. And then thereafter, you would expect regulators to be like, okay, first use it. And then it should be in the next stage of things, and timeline could vary. It would be, well, we expect you to do, because initially it'll be like optional and then expectation. But then when you set expectations, you have to set standards. You have to say, well, okay, you need to make sure that X% of your program must have the use of AI. Again, I don't mean coding, developing, or anything like that. It's about using tools and technology as part of the decision process. And that is what needs to happen if you want the next set of surveyors to be more empowered and to be aligned. And this is exactly what's happening in majority of the courses out there. If you look at the majority of the courses out there, the use of technology is very much embedded, and none of them are coders, unless you're doing computer science. That's different. So there is already there. It's just providing, and it can even be optional modules initially. So again, giving students more option to pick. But then you expect regulators to be like, okay, well, enough optioning now. Now we need to make sure that there are certain standards, and there needs to be a certain percentage, and this is what the framework looks like. Just like, obviously it's working very well within the whole realms of APC, and this universities going through accreditation processes. And I just feel like by just adding those little sections, you can easily overcome this, because RICS is doing a fantastic job with universities anyway, ensuring that they keep their accreditation aligned for their programs, which is one of their selling points, right? They're like, well, come and do real estate at my institution because it's RICS, accredited. And that is exactly how this could be embedded within the within the higher education academy.
Okay, thanks for that. So we've addressed the challenges and what we can do to get there, but let's end on a positive. I'll start with you, Mike. I know this is a very broad question, but what opportunities does AI bring, and how are you using it in your organization, and how do you see the wider industry adopting AI?
I mean, it's huge, right? It's like saying when internet first came out, how are you going to use internet to benefit the industry? It's massive because AI covers so many different areas. We've got generative, we've got learning, we've got natural language, we've got computer vision. There's so many different areas, and I think if we bring it back into the valuation space, I think you've kind of got your day-to-day operations where there's real opportunity and efficiency, but then you've also got the sort of the output, which is the valuation. So within our business, for example, we're using AI to reduce the amount of admin we carry out. We're using co-pilot integrations with our developers so that they can produce code quicker and to a better standard and write tests quicker for it. So it's all, for me, and I'm obviously coming at this more from a technology perspective, but it's about quality and efficiency. And so I think the other opportunities, slightly biased, I would say, because within SurveySphere we're all about capturing images, high quality images and videos, but I really think there's an opportunity, particularly within valuations, to really embed computer vision within the valuation process. And I think the main ways that we need to do that we're perhaps not doing a very good job of at the moment are condition. So I think condition needs a lot of human element at the moment, but there is a massive data set of images and videos that are, I mean, frankly, they're probably siloed in certain organizations, but I think they're growing and becoming more available, and you can get at them if you need to. So having computer vision, being able to scan those images, compare those to previous images, be able to give you a condition just from an image, I think will really change the landscape there for valuations. And I think the other one, and I'm sure Alex will agree with me on this, is around generation of things. So report generation and content generation. We've sat down with surveyors many a time to sort of understand what they do day to day on a, you know, when they're carrying out valuations. And there is so much administration. So it's like painful to watch how much administration there is, and rekeying of information, and again, quality of data. So I think having there's a real opportunity there within the space to be able to take some of that away and allow them to focus on other things.
Alex, if I could just move on to you. AI can often seem like it's all about optimization and efficiency of data, but
Yeah.
it can also have a big impact on how people feel about their jobs. I'm
Correct.
curious to hear about the positive side effects of this. Have you seen any news cases or seen it in your own company where AI has increased job satisfaction amongst employees?
Yeah, absolutely. And that is really kind of the primary reason that we developed the Valos platform. It's because the disparity between the higher education sector when I was doing masters in real estate versus what actually happened in practice were two completely different things. I really thought valuations would be predominantly mathematical and analytical. In reality, 60-70% of my time was spent going on all these different data sources, gathering that and doing a lot of report writing, word formatting, and so on. And ultimately, that's not what you want to be doing. That's not what you're employed to do. That doesn't really add too much value, and it takes up an insane amount of time. And so the incorporation of technology, and when we've seen it, we have clients that go from one, we have users of the platform that go from one firm to another firm, and that the first firm uses Valos and the second firm doesn't use Valos, and they don't want to go back to that report writing, that manual task. I mean, we even sometimes get recruiters asking us if a certain firm is using the Valos platform because the people that they're trying to place have asked if that is the case or not. Because once you start using these tools and driving those efficiencies, you really don't want to go back to administrative tasks. And I think it has a real impact on job satisfaction, because actually what you then enable the valuers to do is what they're actually employed to do, and that is analyze data and determine value.
Yeah, leading on from that point, Alex, Onur, what do you think that some of the practical applications of AI are, and how can they benefit members of the RICS?
So, I mean, again, practical kind of applications. It's all about. I mean, it's echoing kind of what we've kind of discussed and what Alex also said. It's eradicating the need of doing repetitive tasks and focusing on the work that you should actually be doing, and that is what it should be used for, and that is what that is I guess that we should be used for, and that is what we're set out to do. And our RICS kind of falls in very much aligned with that, I would say, in terms of the expectation, because they will be the one who will be setting the expectation and setting the scene.
Okay, cool. So as we look ahead to the future of property valuation, it's evident from this discussion today that AI will transform the future of the sector. We've seen AI technology shape various industries, and I think property valuation is no exception. With that in mind, I'd like to explore all of your insights into the future, which I know it's very hard to predict. As you mentioned about internet, Mike, it's who knows. But I'll start with you, Mike. What do you see? What is your vision for the future of property valuation? How do you see AI transforming the industry in the next 5 to 10 years, and what key developments shall we watch out for?
So I'm going to be slightly controversial here, because both Alex and Onur have been saying that, you know, there's a big aspect of art to evaluation as well as science. I think what we've seen over the last probably couple of years is that, you know, that gap is shortening. I would say, you know, we're getting better at valuing things, and I don't think we're, you know, that far off. This is pretty pie in the sky thinking, but that far off, you know, an AI model that can be creative. You know, I think at the moment we can simulate creativity, and ultimately we're talking about art here, right, as an art form. And I think as that develops further, I think that the gap will narrow again, and we'll be seeing less and less human valuations. And you know, I know that could be perhaps perceived as a negative within the industry, but I think really it allows surveyors to go in and hone in their art form and specialize in areas within within the exciting space that property is. So I think that is already happening. I think the more and I think the banks sort of play a role in this as well, that the more their risk for appetite, their appetite for risk, changes, the more automated valuations will happen. And also as those models advance, for right or wrong, I think there'll be a greater adoption of automated valuations through AI. And I think just to finish on my final point, perhaps a bit further down the line, I think the next big advancement will be when we can combine AI with quantum computing. I think that will sort of take AI to a whole nother level, not just AI, I think just computing power to a whole new level. And I know a lot of the big companies are trying to be the first, or already claiming to be the first to have nailed quantum. I think we're a little way off having it in our day-to-day lives like a chat GPT window, but I think when you start combining the power of quantum and the ability to look across huge data sets and lots of disparate data sets, I think it will address a lot of the challenges we've already mentioned earlier on in the call, and that'll give a whole nother dimension to AI within valuations, but industry as a whole.
Can I just put my fellow valuer mindset at ease here? I'm probably not as bullish as Mike is, although I do agree with him to some extent, and that extent is low value residential property by and large can and will be automated probably for the majority of transactions. And ultimately, if you're a lender and you're lending across 50,000 assets per annum, and you're using an AVM across all of those assets, and they're low value resi, and there's quantum of data, then even incorporating the risk factor of the AVM going wrong, it doesn't really matter, because that risk is spread across not only the entirety of the portfolio, but actually it's spread in the loan to value as well, in which the lender's lending against. So the chances of there being a huge issue there is unlikely. But having said all of that, for higher value resi, for commercial properties, for a number of different use classes that aren't that low value, maybe sub £1 million residential property, I don't think we're going to see any sort of complete eradication of valuers across those sectors for a long time, and simply because, number one, there is just not that amount of data to be able to use in AI models. And also, ultimately, there is still poor data, and there's still an abundance of data that is offline as well, and that is siloed. So I think Mike's right, but only with a certain type of use class up to a certain market value. But in terms of the vision, I hope you don't. Maybe you agree with me, Mike. Maybe you don't. I don't know.
No, but I do agree. Yeah, and I suppose it depends how far down the line you go, and it comes back to data. We keep talking about data, and data is such an integral part of AI, right?
It does exactly that.
I'm not going to argue with you there.
Exactly. Good. I'm glad. But ultimately, and I think the main thing here is, like, in reality, the vision of and the future of AI in property, I don't think anyone knows, to be completely honest. Like, we've got ideas. I'm sure Onur and Mike have ideas, but ultimately, we don't know how AI is going to develop over the next 5 years, or over the next 6 months, let alone over the next 5-10 years. So what I will say is there's going to be certain things that will become standard. I'm happy to kind of put my neck on the line here and say AI will become ubiquitous. There will be a variety of different use cases, which will lead to a myriad of small and larger tools that are used across the industry, and it will become a lot cheaper and easier to use. And beyond that, I don't want to make any more predictions because this is recorded, and I don't want to come back and look like an idiot in 5 years.
Onur, do you want to add your final comments?
Of course. So just first of all, in terms of, I totally agree. Low value assets are less risky, especially when you hedge them against the 10,000 pool of properties. However, if you have to show a lender a two bridge that they have to cross a path and say, well, one of them is a bit rocky, don't know, you'll get there, but we hope you're going to get there, and the other one is a full-on bridge made out of steel, whatever, it's inevitable that when there is something, where they can hedge risk, any lender will always hedge their risk, and they will always eradicate that risk if they can. So that is inevitable, right? The only reason why they're happy to walk on that rocky bridge right now is because FinWise wasn't around. So that's number one. Number two, in terms of what's going to happen to the sector in the future, again, I totally agree. We don't know. It's a big unknown. But one thing I can definitely say that RICS must do is to form a data bank. So the data must be controlled. If we keep on saying data and how data is important, I think it's inevitable that there needs to be a control of this data. So, RICS must take control of data, must become also a data provider, and we should also, I guess, give some form of accreditation or regulation to data banks. So there needs to be a data bank. I mean, you got few of them out there. They're all screaming with some data. I've collaborated with some of which are really bad data. But there needs to be some level of accreditation here. There needs to be some level of accreditation to say, RICS accredited data bank, and that is what needs to happen. So then the quality and the sector could also, improve. And I think that should be the next level of, advancements within AI that I would expect.
I think that would be a dream come true for you, me, everyone else in the tech space, all the valuers. I think probably the RICS won't like you very much for saying that, because that is a huge undertaking, and also the realistic ability to do that, because then it's not just about RICS creating a data bank, it's how do you then organize government, central government and local council also to come into that. I think in an ideal world, amazing.
Yeah, it is debated though within academia. I mean, there's a lot of research papers or journal articles that actually talk about centralizing data and monitoring data, right? Data is the next oil, basically. So, and I think it needs to be controlled. And
absolutely agree.
Yeah, I think the
you've got
topic.
bodies like the OPDA as well that are going a long way to trying to standardise data across the industry, so not just within surveying. And I think what they're doing there is fantastic and much needed, and would help within valuations and surveying as well.
Yeah, I think this topic about data can be our next panel topic. But yeah, I think this conversation could go on forever. But for today, I want to thank you all for taking the time to discuss this interesting topic, and I look forward to hearing your views about this in the future. So for today, thanks guys.
Thank you for having us. Cheers. Thank you,
Cheers.
Onur and Mike as well. Great to speak with you on this topic.
Alex, thanks, Michael.
Yeah, thanks, guys.